Wednesday. Do you remember that time when people used to say, "It is Wednesday, my dudes"? I can't remember why that was a thing, but it was a thing quite some time ago. It is Wednesday, it is hump day, and I am going to be doing my usual regular Ask Me Anything, which means you can ask me anything. Feel free to put a question in the comments anytime you like. I have some questions to begin with. Oh no, I haven't turned my phone on silent. I don't know if you can hear the oops. Right, hopefully that won't bother us. Okay, so I have some questions already, but stick some in the comments if you have one. Greetings from sunny Poland. That's rude. I'm in grey and miserable Scotland. Apparently there's like a yellow weather warning. So thanks for joining us. It's lovely. Have you been to Saudi Arabia? I have not. What a question. Are you inviting me? Because I'll come. I mean, yeah, I'll come, I think. All right, so I was thinking more questions about being fat or in this case. Hi Lydia, it's so good to see you. Great that you're in Canada. I don't know which side you're on, but it's morning for you, so thank you for joining me. I'm going to talk a little bit about, I've got some questions about carbs and ketones because of my most recent content, but please ask me literally anything. I'm already enjoying the questions, so feel free to ask me anything you like. What do you think of intermittent fasting? Really difficult to avoid people saying it is healthy, but sounds dodgy to me. Oh, Jade, we're totally getting into it. Ontario, Lydia, you're on the right side, so at least it's not like crazy o'clock. All right, let's do intermittent fasting first. Should we do intermittent fasting? Yes, we'll do intermittent fasting first. First of all, I want you to take this out of context. Let's take intermittent fasting out of context. I want you to pretend you're a doctor for a moment. And a patient comes to see you. And we'll pretend for this moment this patient is thin, all right? Because you need the visual. So the thin patient comes to see you, maybe in baggy clothes, sits down and says to you, I'm not feeling very well. I feel tired all the time, and you start thinking, okay, well, are you eating enough? And they say, well, I go quite long periods of time without eating anything. Oh, like how long do you mean? Oh, like good 12 hours. You stop eating regularly, do you? Yeah, I do. Yeah, quite often I won't eat anything, and then when I do eat something, I eat a small amount, or I have very rigid rules, and then they start telling you about all these things that they're doing. If you were a good doctor, you would immediately think, I think this person has an eating disorder. And that's what intermittent fasting is. It's a prescribed eating disorder. I don't care what anyone else says. When you have such rigid, strict rules around when you can eat, when you can't eat, and you're encouraging fasting, even if it's not an actual diagnosable eating disorder, it is disordered eating. And if we look at the studies that talk about the risks of eating disorder, one thing we know is that people who use they categorize weight loss techniques into like moderate or severe, and severe is skipping meals, severe is not eating for long periods of time, severe is also using tablets or pills or etc. But one of the things is long periods of time when you're not eating. We know that increases your risk of developing an eating disorder by up to 18 times, 1/8 according to one study. Isn't that a bit worrying, folks? Shouldn't we be a bit concerned about that? Disordered eating disorders, whatever you want to call it, they're serious mental health conditions. Do not prescribe those. So that's the first problem with intermittent fasting. The second problem with intermittent fasting is it doesn't do anything. We have so many studies that looked at whether intermittent fasting improved your blood glucose, your blood pressure, your cholesterol, your risk of a heart attack. I don't care. And even whether intermittent fasting leads to prolonged weight loss, sustained weight loss. And guess what? All of the studies said no. No, they don't do any of those things. Oh, fine in the first month, maybe in the first 3 months, but not long term. Intermittent fasting, well, actually, interestingly, one of the people in the UK that was very pro-intermittent fasting and believed that it would prolong your life was Sir Michael Mosley. I think, was he a sir? I don't know. Michael Mosley, a supposed doctor, he never actually practiced medicine, who was a TV presenter in the UK, and he presented lots of things, and he wrote a book, and he was obsessed with intermittent fasting, and he died very young. Very, very, very young, in fact. So not sure we believe him. That's not a reason not to do it. I'm just pointing that out. Just a bit of social commentary from your old pal, Dr. Ash Alami. Anyway, where was I? Intermittent fasting doesn't actually do anything, increases your risk of eating disorders, and potentially also increases your risk of chronic inflammation, hormonal imbalances, weight cycling. All of these things have been proven to be bad for your long-term health. Hope that answers that question. Please tell us more about this protein trend. Where does it come from, and is it legitimately good for you? I'm having kidney stone flashbacks. Oh my goodness, I'm so glad you said that. Thank you for saying that. I was actually going to talk about that. So yes, let's do that. Let's talk about low carb, high protein diets. So there are some people that will just say increase the protein in your diet. There's some people that say, well, like reduce the carbs and put protein in your diet. There's some people that are like protein only, we don't do carbs. Those carnivores out there are very obsessed right now. They're very like, be a man, eat meat, don't eat anything else. I know somebody who does this diet, and it's I don't know how they do it. Anyway, where does it come from? Well, it comes from wellness culture. It's diet culture. It's nonsense. I'll explain the theory behind it. Our body's main source of energy is glucose. We get glucose from carbohydrates. The carbohydrates break down into glucose, and that's what our cells need for energy. When we have lots of carbohydrates and we have lots of glucose in our blood, our cells use it first and foremost, right? They need it for energy, and then they store it, and they store it in a form of glucose, stored glucose called glycogen. Glycogen is the stored form of glucose, and that's like our short-term supply. So if you then don't have a meal for a while and you run out of energy, your cells are like, don't worry, I've got this. I've got some stored glucose. We'll just use that. Great stuff. If you have a lot of sugar in your blood, and so much sugar that you, the deadly glucose spike. So when you have a deadly glucose spike, right? It's glucose spike. What happens is your liver goes, don't worry about this. I'm going to turn that sugar into long-term energy, right? We've done the short-term energy, but I'll now turn it into long-term energy. And it turns glucose into fatty acids. The fatty acids are then released by the liver into your blood cells, and then they accumulate in your adipose tissue or your fat cells. All right? So, obviously, adipose cells, terrible, very bad for you. You can't possibly have any. That's terrible stuff. You need to get rid of those immediately. Not true, but anyway, that's what we believe. So we want to prevent, the theory is, we want to prevent excess glucose being turned into fat. Hence, low carb diet. That's the theory. I'll tell you why that theory is wrong. Now, let's say you're not getting any carbs, or you're getting very few carbs in your diet. What happens then is that your body runs out of glucose, and then it runs out of glycogen, the stored form of glucose, and then your body's like, we need something else. And so we're able to turn the fatty acids, the fat, into a source of energy, but not into glucose. We turn it into ketones. This is your body's emergency supply of energy. Think of it as a backup generator, okay? We shouldn't be needing it, but sometimes we will need it. Our body is prepared for that. It's like, don't worry, I got you. It's why you'll see animals in, like bears, perfect example, fucking love a bear. Bears, they get really, really fat right before they go and hibernate, and when they're hibernating, they're not getting any energy, and so they get quite skinny, and then they go and get fat again. So their bodies have adapted. Human beings aren't meant to hibernate, and therefore we're not supposed to go through those big changes in our body shape. But bears do, and that's a classic example. All right, when I'm not getting any food, I'll use my emergency supply of energy. For us, it's just meant to be short term. And it's because there were periods of time, hundreds of thousands of years ago, when we didn't have access for food. So we needed ketones. But ketones are an emergency supply. They are actually acidic. And this is very important. If you have too many ketones in your blood, you become acidotic. You have too much acid in your blood, which can lead to coma and then death. And type 1 diabetics will have heard of a DKA, a diabetic ketoacidosis. That's because they've got too much ketones in their blood and they die. This doesn't happen if you're on the keto diet. However, what is the long-term impact of high levels of ketones in our blood? High for what is considered normal, not high like if you're a type 1 diabetic. What is the long-term impact of that? The answer is we don't know. Now, let's talk now about protein. People, like if you're not eating carbs, you've got to eat something, right? So we replace it with protein, and everyone says, protein's really, really good for you. I don't believe that for a second. There's no evidence that protein is good for you. You should have some protein. right? I need to make it very clear, we should all eat some fat, some protein, and some carbohydrates. It's important. If you are going to be well nourished, you want to eat all three of these macronutrients balanced. You want to have some fiber. Fiber is good for you. You want to have as many vitamins and minerals as you can possibly pack into your diet, because that's how you maintain a healthy body. There are so many ways to get these things. I'm not a nutrition expert, but I would just like to point out that you can get vitamins and minerals from, dare I say it, processed food. Yes, processed food has vitamins and minerals and carbs and fats and proteins as well. But anyway, I'm not here to talk about nutrition. I am here to tell you about, and now I'm about to say it, I'm like, oh crap, I can't remember which hormone was which. It's tryptophan or it's tyrosine. I might have to do it in another post. But anyway, when you have a high protein, low carb diet, what happens is your body stops creating a particular amino acid, which is either tryptophan or tyrosine. And these are essential building blocks, and they're important for the creation of dopamine, serotonin, all of the important brain chemicals. And so if you're not getting enough dopamine, you're not going to be good, right? You need your dopamine for your brain to work and function well. You need your serotonin for your mood levels. You need noradrenaline as well. So it's either tryptophan or tyrosine that is impacted when you have a high protein, low carb diet. And I can't remember which one it is, damn it, but I will find it out. That's the reason why low protein, high carb diets, low carb, high protein diets can give you brain fog. That wasn't very good solution, but yes, I had ketosis episode when I was literally starving myself after having a baby to lose baby weight, and I was hospitalized and almost seen the other side of the rainbow. Yeah, do you know what, that's actually really common. I've also seen it. It's something we see a lot in pregnant people with hyperemesis, and hyperemesis is like extreme morning sickness, right? And so if you are not getting enough fluids in you and you are becoming massively dehydrated and not eating enough, you will then become ketotic, and as I said, it can kill you. Now, a low protein, high carb diet, low carb, I keep saying it, that's what I go for, low protein, high carb, but a low carb, high protein diet can lead to ketosis if you're being extreme about it. I don't want everyone to panic and just think, oh my God, I'm going to die. Probably not, but it's not a good idea. And I think it's particularly not a good idea if you're a diabetic. And that's something I want to talk about at a later date, why it's prescribed to diabetics. And I would argue that it's actually, from a physiological point of view, really bad for us and dangerous for us. Right, I hope I answered those questions. Who's got more? You're here. There's quite a few of you. Ask me a question, any question you like. I'm ready. Just bring it on. I've got some ones that I've written down. We did brain fog with low carb, we did ketones. So someone asked a very good question about, and I'm paraphrasing here, it's like, do I think that having food available at all times has had an impact on our weight collectively, like as a society as a whole? And the first thing I want to point out is not all of us have food available at all times. In fact, I would argue that there is a vast majority, or not the vast majority, a lot of people in the world do not have access to food all the time. And it doesn't, in this country, whatever country you're in right now, let's not pretend it's something that happens in other parts of the world. There are lots of people who do not have access to food, especially nutritious food, for lots of reasons. And it's not necessarily for lack of money or for lack of shops. It could be lots of other reasons. And actually, fat people are often not getting enough food. We are actually living in food scarcity, not because we don't have access to food, but because we are simply denying ourselves food. We've been told that we're not allowed to eat it. So I would argue that not all of us have food around at all times. And many fat people are denying themselves food chronically, like all the time, because that's just what we've been taught to do. Now, as I said before, when I was alluding to the way that our body processes carbohydrates and proteins and fats, etc., our bodies are designed to maintain balance through a number of different hormones, through the endocrine system. So when it comes to the food that we eat, what we digest, how we process it, it's all part of the endocrine system. It's all part of our hormones. It's all down to hormones. And so I would argue that, yes, we were designed not to always have food around us. And the fact that we have food around us all the time means that, well, that evolution has not caught up with 21st century life. Let's put it that way. Okay? So the fact that we have access to food, whereas we didn't always, may well have had an impact on us collectively. But I'm not sure why we need to talk about it. Like, I don't get it. Like, we live in the 21st century. Like, unless you're planning to go back in time or you want to go live like they did in the Middle Ages, that's fine. You do you. You'll probably die. I want to point out that at no point in time in history have we ever lived as long as we do now. We might be getting fatter, but we're living longer than we ever did. Look at the median life expectancy over the last 100 years. Forget hundreds, 100 years. We are living significantly longer, and that applies around the world as well. I'm not suggesting that the median life expectancy is the same here as it is, say, in Niger or Chad. It's not, but we are all living longer. The 21st century has changed our life expectancies dramatically. Does it mean we have more food availability? Yes. Does it mean that that's made us fatter? Possibly. I don't know. I'm not an expert. However, I don't get why you're asking me this question. Like, I don't see the point of answering this. I don't see the point of this question. It is what it is. We live as we do. You know, people often say when we're talking about weight loss being unsustainable, and I will explain the weight loss cycle, and this is why weight loss is unsustainable. I will explain, look, when you lose, we've got studies now that shows that a kilogram of weight loss is the equivalent of a 100 calorie appetite increase. For every kilogram of weight you lose, your appetite increases by roughly 100 calories. And there are people that will say, well, just don't eat food. And I'm like, okay, that's your solution. Your appetite goes up, your natural appetite goes up, and you're just not supposed to eat. And people then say, well, that's why weight loss isn't sustainable. It's not because it isn't sustainable, it's because nobody is able to do it. And I'm like, okay, then it's a moot point. If nobody's able to do it, then nobody's able to do it. End of discussion. We don't have to carry on, because it doesn't matter whether it's theoretically possible, whether it's theoretically the case. If it's not actually possible in real life, who gives a fuck? Pardon my French. There's some more questions. How many meals do you recommend per day? I was instructed to wait at least 4 hours between snacks, meals and drinks. All right. Now, I don't think that breastfeeding is a superior way of feeding your baby. I want to say this. It's very important. I do not think it's superior. However, when you breastfeed, you're taught to feed your baby on demand. When you bottle feed, you will often space out the feed. Not always. Some people will feed on demand, but you will often, a lot of people will say, okay, every 4 hours I'll feed my baby their bottle. Nature intended us. Again, this is not a criticism of people who bottle feed. Breastfeeding is not the answer, blah, blah, blah. I'm not into it. I breastfed all 3 of my children. It was great, but also I have lots of friends that didn't, and that was equally great, okay? This is not a criticism of breastfeeding or bottle feeding. But my point is, the natural way is to feed your baby on demand. We can all agree that bottle feeding is something that we can do now because 21st century technology, but not something that we could do 100,000 years ago. So human beings are supposed to be fed on demand. That is natural. Go and look at nature. Look at every mammal out there. Babies are fed on demand. Now, later on, as they get bigger and they no longer are using milk as their main source of energy, then, it's when food's available. You eat when food is available. And that kind of answers our previous question, right? Food is always available now. So you could theoretically be eating all the time, which is exactly what I recommend you do. If you're eating intuitively, eat when you're hungry and stop when you're full. Now, learning when you're hungry and when you're full is not easy. Not in 21st century, because those instincts were cut off around the time we stopped breastfeeding and started being told what to eat and when to eat and how to eat it. So when we were very young. So yes, you have to learn to eat intuitively. That's not something that you can do automatically. But if you are eating intuitively, then there is no such thing as how many meals you eat a day. You eat when you're hungry, you stop when you're full, the end. One day will always be different from the other. You might not be hungry at all, or or just fancy something very light on one day, and the next day you might be ravenous, and that is because of a lot of different reasons, environmental, hormonal, but your body knows. Your body absolutely knows when to eat and what to eat. So There's no such thing. Never apologise for your English. Never do that again. Naughty. Just kidding. Right, when being fat is a result of so many different physiological and environmental factors, how do you clap back at people who point to famine-stricken zones or blue zone demographics like Japan? Really interesting. First of all, I don't get into these conversations. Again, it's a moot point. I am fat. Can I fix that? No. Studies have shown over and over again I can't fix it. Everywhere you look at any study you like, I can't fix it. So I am fat. If you want to figure out why I'm fat, you carry on. Do you, babes? I'm not going to judge you, but don't involve me in the conversation. So that's how I clap back. I simply go, yeah, I'm not having this conversation, and walk away. What I will point out is, say, for example, Japan. What's the difference between Japan and somebody from of Japanese origin and somebody of Eastern European origin? The difference is primarily genetics, right? And then environment, but primarily genetics. And I think that's the answer to the question. It's about genetics. It's a lot of other things. But there is a reason why people, for example, are shorter in stature in certain parts of the world versus others. Why is it that traditionally people of Scandinavian descent are tall? Just statistically speaking. And people of Chinese descent are shorter. Statistically, obviously there are tall Chinese people and there are short Scandinavian people, but we all know that differences in height are quite common in different demographics. And we know that the reason is because of genetics. And no one ever questions that. No one's like, oh, it's because they're not stretched enough at birth, or, oh, it's because, there's not enough something in the water. No, we just go, genetics. It's the same with weight. It's exactly the same with weight. In fact, experts say that the percentage of your height that is controlled by genetics is about the same as the percentage of your weight that is controlled by genetics. So, famine-stricken zones, I will point out, we don't want to be in famine. I can tell you that anybody's in a famine-stricken zone. If you said to them, you have a choice, stay in a famine-stricken zone or move somewhere where you might eventually become fat, which would you prefer? I promise you they will say, I'll take fat, thanks. Famine will destroy your life. It's miserable and ends in death. Why do people sort of say, oh, well, look over there? It's like people who say, oh, I wish I had an eating disorder, then I'll be thinner. That's ludicrous. Stop. I'm not interested in that. Do you think there's any value in trying to limit sugar intake when you are not diabetic? Or is this idea coming from diet culture? I cannot tell you how angry this wellness culture bullshit is. The sugar, we once upon a time, we were terrified of fat. When I was a young'un, I was not allowed to eat eggs because eggs contained cholesterol and that was bad for your heart. It's ironic now that we encourage people to eat eggs as part of a healthy, balanced diet. They're a really good source of protein, and actually there are studies that show they help your heart. But back then, when I was a young'un, we were obsessed with fat because we logically said being fat is caused by eating too much fat. We were basic bitches back in those days. And then along came, and it was very much primarily driven by the weight loss industry, in particular the people who manufacture diabetic drugs. We became obsessed with carbs. We stopped hating on fat. We still hate on it a little bit. Even when we're eating proteins, they've got to be lean proteins, don't they? Unless you're a carnivore and then you eat the fat as well. I am not a carnivore. I love carbohydrates, but I also love to eat the fat as well. I do both. Not either or, both. But anyway, I digress again. I'm very full of energy today. So what was I saying? Oh God, I lost my train of thought. I was talking about fat, but before I was talking about that, it's completely gone. How embarrassing. Who can remind me? We were talking about limiting sugar intake. Right, that's it. Sugar has become the enemy. Carbohydrates, but if you're going to eat a carb, it has to be like a complex carbohydrate, brown pasta, wholemeal this, brown rice. If you're eating white rice, then you're failing at life. Rubbish. Absolute rubbish. Our bodies are designed to eat whatever our body, and especially if you look at parts of the world where food hasn't changed that much, right? Like, I know that in parts of the world, our diet has changed massively over the last 100 or 200 years. But there are other parts of the world where diets haven't really changed at all since, for hundreds and hundreds of years. And if you look at those cultures, white rice staple, yam is a staple, cassava is a staple, like starches are a staple, white rice. Nobody eats brown rice in kind of like certain cultures. So we've got to stop being terrified of carbs and terrified of sugar. There is absolutely no evidence that restricting sugar will prevent diabetes or even insulin resistance. There is none. In fact, by restricting the amount of carbohydrates that you are consuming and by introducing food rules into your life, so restriction is actually stressful. When you're like, do you know what, I'm not going to eat any glucose on the first day, or I'm going to limit my sugar intake. On the first day, it's fine. On the second day, it's fine. Maybe on the fifth day, it's fine. Maybe on the 11th day, it's fine. You might even go a month and it's not bothering you, but there will come a point in time when your body will be desperate for sugar and you will constantly be fighting against this desire to consume sugar. And the experts all say that's because you're addicted. No, it's because your body needs sugar. Sometimes it needs carbohydrates that it can break down into sugar. And sometimes it just needs some fucking energy. Give me glucose now. And so it wants sugar. I'm an intuitive eater. I don't have a particularly sweet tooth. It's very rare that I'm craving something sweet. If I'm craving something sweet, it's often like a fruit or something. I'm not saying that like I'm an angel, but I don't genuinely I don't crave ice cream. But there will be certain parts of the month where I will be shoving sugar into my mouth because, or sweet stuff. My body is asking for it, is begging for it. And oftentimes it's because my brain is already exhausted. Your brain cannot operate without glucose. Neither can your red blood cells. They can't function without glucose. They can't use ketones. So our bodies will crave sugar. And the more you say no, the more stressed you get. The more your cortisol levels rise. And high levels of cortisol actually cause insulin resistance. So there's no evidence that cutting out carbs. Now, do I think that some of us have become very dependent on certain things that we don't need to have? Like, have we become dependent on things? Maybe. Like a lot of you are dependent on coffee. I don't drink coffee. That's not because I'm perfect. I just don't like it. I can't stand the taste of coffee, so I don't drink it. I'll drink it very occasionally if I'm in the mood, but it's not something I have to have every day. Some of you will need your coffee first thing in the morning. And so, you've kind of become dependent on it. Are you addicted to it? No. If I said to you, like, you're going to die if you keep drinking coffee, you'll stop. You might feel miserable for a few days without getting that caffeine rush, but you'll be able to quit it. But, a lot of us are dependent on a lot of things. And sometimes it's just because it makes us feel good. Or it wakes us up in the morning. Or a glass of wine after a long day at work helps us unwind during the day. There's a fine line between alcohol dependence and a glass of wine after work every day, but most of us are not crossing it. And if you are, then it's often because there's some deep emotional reason. And it's that we need to attend to, and we very rarely do. So there might be some people who are use sweet things in the same way that people use caffeine or alcohol or drugs or cigarettes or whatever. They use it to soothe themselves, to self-soothe. I'm not suggesting that doesn't happen. I'm sure that it does, but that doesn't make it bad per se. It makes me sad, but it doesn't make it bad. And my answer to that will always be, hey, can we do something about this trauma that you're holding on to? Like, can we support you in any way? And B, I don't want to demonize anything. So no, there's no evidence that cutting down on sugar is going to prevent you from being diabetic. And in addition to that, you don't need to cut down on sugar ever. All of our cells are designed to use carbs or sugar for energy. Yes, they are. All of them are. However, as I said this earlier on, maybe you weren't here at the beginning, we've talked about this, so rewatch the beginning of this. But as I said, your brain and your red blood cells cannot use ketones as energy. Some of your other cells can, but your brain and your blood cells can't. And so what happens is that when we're in ketosis, we talked about ketosis before, when we're in a state of ketosis and we're primarily, and ketones are our primary source of energy, our body has to like reserve the glucose for the important parts of us, like, you know, the part of us that we can't live without, the brain and the blood. So so you have to have some carbs. No one lives without any carbs. That's not a real thing. But yeah, again, you're putting your body under an immense amount of pressure. Why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? Why do you want to be in a state of ketosis? Acidosis. There is acid in your blood. Why are you doing that? I don't get it. Like, just on a fundamental level, who wants to live their entire lives, you know, using a backup generator as their main source of energy? It's not going to work, right? Like, something's going to go wrong. You don't want to use your emergency supply of fuel on a daily basis. You only do that when it's necessary. Hi Lisa, it's so good to see you. I'm the same, literally hate the taste of coffee. Do you hate coffee too? Oh my God, I've never met anyone, especially an American. My gosh, are we even allowed to admit that out loud? Here it's okay because they'll go, it's all right, tea. I also don't drink tea. I do drink decaffeinated tea. I'll drink rooibos tea for all the South Africans out there. Hey, howdy. I love a good cup of rooibos, but I do not like coffee. And also, I'm really bad. I don't like caffeinated drinks either. So and someone who is being like recently come to terms with the fact that I have quite interesting ADHD. I need to get that fix from somewhere. I'm gonna have to figure it out. I used to smoke. That's not the solution. Gave that up a long time ago, guys. Don't worry. All right. Drinking excessive water, is that helpful at all? Don't drink excessive water. The only people that would want to really be focusing on their hydration is people who have POTS. And that's not to say do it excessively, but you really have, you have POTS. Postural, what's the O stand for? Orthostatic tachycardia syndrome? Just know it as POTS. If you have that, then it's important to up your fluid levels. Most of us are not drinking enough, he says as he takes a sip. And that is because, again, like we've lost our hunger cues. I think a lot of us have lost our thirst cues as well because of hustle culture. Many of us, like me, don't drink enough during the day. We don't wee enough during the day because we don't have the time. So if you're really, one of you was like orthostatic, thank you. If you're drinking, if you're busy, you forget to drink, you forget to wee. I have one of these. I don't use it at all. I probably drink about 8 bottles of this, but that is because I'm on a medication that makes me really thirsty. Make sure you're resting enough. And when you're resting enough and you're giving yourself intervals in the day, I would say, like, you know, every hour, taking a stop, taking a breath, you know, recentering yourself, like working out the kinks, maybe going for a little amble, stretching it, doing some stretches. At that point in time, you'll probably notice you're thirsty. And then you're like, I'm thirsty, and then you'll drink. So the people who put off drinking water until the late afternoon, I literally, and I think, again, now that I'm realise I'm neurodivergent, I'm like, that's why I did it. If I stopped, it was very hard to get started again. So I had to keep pushing through. So I couldn't wee. And so often I'd wee at 7:30 in the morning, and then it wouldn't wait for another wee until 3:30 in the afternoon. So then you can't drink in order to do that. Don't do that. It's not good for you. So drink water, yes. And also, if you can't drink water, don't panic. Drink fluids, you know. Ideally not, you know, alcohol. That's not a fluid. Drink fluid. Drink tea. Drink coffee. Remember that tea and coffee are diuretics, and so if they're caffeinated, so you'll drink more, but you'll wee more. So you need to still drink more. But put cordial or whatever you want in your drinks. Relax, okay? Make it pleasant. Don't make yourself miserable. Don't stress yourself out. But yeah, I'm a big fan of drinking water. It's good for you. Just don't do the whole wellness culture of like we have to drink. Oh, shut up. Your body will tell you when it's too thirsty, right? You'll know, you'll become dehydrated, and then your body will tell you. But at that point in time, it's screaming at you. It's kind of like when you're so hungry that you're like, and I sometimes when I get so hungry, I feel nauseous, like I'm going to vomit. the same as with water. If you get to the point where you feel dehydrated, you know, you feel a bit like dry mouth and headache, and you know, you've left it too late. You want to hit it before then, right? But like I said, I used to do that every day at work. So yes, someone's saying here, we started weeing more since working from home, and turns out probably because I have more brain space. Yes, and access to toilet, and like, you know, you have to go a long way to get there, and it all makes a difference. But yes, drink is good. Herbal tea, thoughts? Sure, love a herbal tea. Like I said, I'm a herbal tea fan, but only if it's your thing. Like, you're not superior if you're drinking herbal tea, but I do love herbal tea, and I love, you know, there's evidence that green tea has antioxidants in it, and so I'm a fan of a green tea, but not for wellness culture's sake, because I actually genuinely like green tea. It tastes good. Don't really like black tea. Sorry. Right. Sorry. Ask me anything, and you are taking it to heart. Again, if you're joining, please ask me anything you like. I have a couple more questions. I should really keep an eye on the time, because I've got to drop someone off. I've still got time. It's not going to kick me off yet. So there was a question that I sort of answered, but I'm going to answer here as well, because comments is very different. There's not enough space for me to yap, as my daughter would say. You're just yapping all the time. You're such a yapper. So if you're fat and it's impacting your fitness, your ability to put on shoes, to climb stairs, etc., what should you do? That's a really good question, isn't it? And I found myself, when I heard that question, pausing for a moment. Because it's all very well for me to say, but weight loss isn't sustainable, and yada, 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 yada. Yes, all of these things might be true. And at the same time, when you are in a body that the world does not accommodate, that the world is not, like, it's not, you know, there's no reason we should be climbing up steps. It's not like it's not essential for life, climbing stairs. We designed houses, office buildings, whatever, with stairs, right? So now people have to climb stairs. So, you know, the world isn't necessarily designed to accommodate everyone. And let's think about it. If you were born without lower limbs, or if you were or a problem with your lower limbs, if you're in a wheelchair, if you're disabled, climbing stairs is no joke. I know for most people it's like, everybody should be able to climb stairs. Yeah, unless you're disabled, and then you can't climb stairs, or it's difficult to climb stairs. And so no, we don't all have to climb stairs, but we do, because life, right? Society. And, you know, putting on shoes, tying shoelaces. Human beings designed shoelaces. And, you know, all of these things, being able to comfortably wipe our bottoms when we go to the toilet. Once upon a time, animals didn't wipe their bottoms, right? Like, human beings weren't wiping their bottoms for all of, you know, for as long as we've known it. Toilet paper is a relatively new thing. All right, folks. And there are many cultures where you use water, right? Bidets exist for a reason. Other cultures have other. I'm not going to get into it. My point is that it's actually the demands of society that are impacting you. It's not your body. Like, yes, I understand you have to put on your shoes, and so if you can't put on your shoes, that is really hard. That's really hard. But the fact that you have to put on your shoes is because we live in the 21st century, and we all have to wear shoes. And many times those shoes are not something that we can just slip on. So one solution is finding shoes that you can just slip on. You might not want to do that. And so it's a really difficult question. And I didn't want to be like really blasé about the answer, because I could hear it in the voice of this person. It's really hard. Like, for whatever reason, I'm now fat enough that it's impacting my day-to-day life. And I don't have a solution. But what I will say to you is that weight loss isn't the solution. Because losing weight is going to end up in you regaining that weight, and oftentimes becoming heavier. And a lot of people can look back at their lives and say, do you know what? My biggest periods of weight gain were often after I went on a diet and lost a lot of weight, and then I regained it afterwards, plus some, right? Plus some, it's always plus some. So if being fat is limiting you in some way, then getting fatter is going to limit you even more, correct? So what I said to this person, and I don't know how helpful this advice was actually, why don't we work on the things you're struggling with? Write a list of all the things that you think your weight is impacting. Putting on shoes, climbing upstairs, good answers, good start. Write everything. Write it all down. And then let's tackle each one. Let's think, how can we help you to do this? What's the solution for this particular thing? It's not weight loss, so what's the other solutions? And we have to work through it. And we can absolutely improve our strength in flexibility and posture and balance without losing any weight. So I just want to point out, I'm not anti-exercise. I'm not anti-anything. I'm also not anti-weight loss, just to make that clear. I am pro-autonomy. So if that's helpful, I hope that's helpful. I've got one more question, and unless you've got any more questions, I am going to answer. I have a lime tree who has a lime tree in the garden? That's amazing. Good God. I'm loving that. How do you combat the stigma that fat people are just lazy? Again, we had another question a little while ago. I'm going to answer it in the very similar way. How do you combat the stigma? I simply laugh in people's face and tell them to ignore it. I'd love to know how you react, but this is not something that a conversation I'm willing to engage in anymore. If you want to assume that I'm fat because I'm lazy, you carry on with your assumption, but that's your problem. That is not my problem. I refuse to take it on. I refuse to hold that for you. I really do. If you think fat people are lazy, then you hold on to that, friend. Carry on. But I'm not interested in it. Thanks very much. So I will often laugh and just like, don't be ridiculous, and walk away. I don't engage in the conversations. I don't try and prove anything. I have nothing to say, because people's issues are their own issues, and I know where their issues come from. I'm not mean about it. I'm not judging them. Like, quite often, this is a message that has been repeated over and over and over and over again in their lives. But for a lot of times, it's a place of fear. It's a place of self-loathing, poor self-esteem. Like, oftentimes, there's lots of reasons. I don't judge you. I don't hate you. You carry on thinking what you think and believing what you believe, but it has nothing to do with me. I don't need to prove that I'm lazy. And also, there's nothing wrong with being lazy. And also, there has to be some softness and gentleness and kindness in people's lives. And right now, I am doing this amazing month-long course called Summer of Rest. It's with my good friend Elle Bauer Johnson. Those of you, I might tag her in this actually. But Elle gets us to do exercise. So Elle's like a yoga instructor and stuff. And my favourite thing about all the things we've been doing with Elle is she's like, so you could do it like this, or you could do it like this, or you could just sit down, take a nap. I don't care. Like, you can just, we were doing some stretches, and she's like, if you want, you can just sit there and stretch energetically, do it in your mind's eye. You don't even have to move your body, or you can just be sitting there and like nodding your head. I love that. It's the best exercise class I've ever gone to. It's not even an exercise class. It's nothing to do with what it is. But as she's taking us through these practices, like breathing practices, Pilates practices, body realignment practices, she is totally cool with you not doing it. And she encourages us to say no when we don't want to do it. Don't want to do that. No, not doing it. Just go sit here instead. And so there needs to be that level of kindness and compassion and support in our lives. So when I hear the term lazy, what I hear is I will force myself to do something even if I don't want to. So there are days I'm just lazy. And by lazy, I mean I just sit and do nothing. I don't get up, I don't move, I don't exercise, because that's what my body needs on that day. And I don't care what people think about me. And I don't care if people look at me and go, that's why you're fat. Maybe, but I still don't care. I need that softness and kindness and gentleness, and I need the rest in my life. So, lazy it's one of those words that, like, nowadays, it's almost a compliment, My husband says I'm the least lazy person he knows. Yes, and the thing is, a lot of us aren't lazy. In fact, if you're fat, you probably work harder than most people. Why? Because you had to. You've had to prove yourself, because everyone thinks you're lazy, so you have to work harder in order for them to accept you. If you have any marginalised identity, any oppressed identity, you're having to work twice as hard, 10 times as hard as those who don't, those who are privileged, just to get the same stuff. So of course, you work harder than most people. What I'm trying to say to you is you don't have to. You really don't. You could also sit on your ass and do nothing, like me. My yoga teacher is the same, always says, you can just lie down. Oh, I haven't been to a yoga class like that before. When a yoga teacher was just like, rest, take a nap. It's great. Oh my goodness. It's life-changing for me. and Elle telling me that I can and should say no whenever I want. You can just say no for the sake of it. You can just be like, I'm not exercising today. For no reason, I'm just not going to. I don't want to move, so I won't. I'm going to lie in my bed today, so I will. Like, it's okay to do that. If you're doing it every day, then there's a chance that you're doing it every day because something's not right here. And that's okay. And I want to support you with that. But if it's just because today you just don't feel like it, don't do it. Good Lord. Don't care about this lazy. Lazy is a lazy word. Amazing. That is exactly right. I might borrow that. Sorry. I love your Instagram handle as well, Coco Chanel. That's amazing. But I might borrow that. Lazy is a lazy word. I agree. Right. Final question, and then I'm done. The question was, if you're so why are we referring people for bariatric surgery, like for everything? Like, why? I heard an awful story. I will not divulge the details of the story, but suffice to say, this person was seeing an oncologist, a cancer doctor. This person has an untreatable form of cancer, in remission at the moment, but untreatable form. Will eventually, unfortunately, claim their lives, and there's nothing we can do about it. This person went to their oncologist to tell their oncologist about all sorts of symptoms they were getting, and I know that these symptoms are most likely caused by their cancer. And it's awful, horrible stuff. Cancer is a really fucking miserable disease, man, and the thing that it does. And so things like loss of appetite, feeling sick all the time. This is almost certainly due to the cancer. And the oncologist did two things. Number one, dismissed the symptoms and went, no, I'm feeling tired. Oh, it's because you're lazy. I don't have an appetite. Oh, that's probably a good thing. This is somebody who, eating and nutrition is fundamentally important for them, for their well-being. They must be well nourished in order to be well, and in order to remain in remission. So when somebody who has cancer is saying, I'm not eating enough, I can't eat enough, it should immediately be like, right, how are we going to get calories into you? How are we going to get nutrition into you? Essential. But instead it was dismissed. Nah, that's not a problem. That's a you problem. And then the second thing that happened, and this it boiled my piss in a way that something hasn't for a long time. Honestly, I wanted to punch something. Came close to punching a wall. The oncologist offered a referral for bariatric surgery, for weight loss surgery. Now, to begin with, weight loss surgery is not appropriate for somebody who is so high risk anyway. They could die on the table, have a much higher risk. I don't know an anaesthetist that would agree to it, but can you imagine? That's where we've got to, where people who are so ill that they require, they require the help of an oncologist. Like when you're in an oncology clinic, right? Weight loss is not something that should ever be talked about. And it makes me furious. But that's where we're at. Like, that is the state of the world. I want to make something abundantly clear. If you look at information and studies on bariatric surgery that are coming out in the last few years, if you go and look at what they're saying, they are all admitting it's now become widely accepted that bariatric surgery is not a long-term solution, that the majority of people will start regaining weight around the 2-year mark, and most people will need to have their second surgery at roughly the 7-year mark. That's the average. That's when you need your second surgery. So if you have a sleeve, they might turn it into a bypass, or they'll go in and they'll do all sorts of things, all sorts of procedures now. Second surgery after 7 years. So when, how you're selling a product, right? And you know that it has a shelf life. It's going to last a certain amount of time and then it will end. We do this with knees all the time. If you need to have a knee replacement, the orthopedic surgeon will say to you, this knee will not last forever. And so if we put it in too early, we're going to have to replace it again. That's what they'll tell you, right? It absolutely should be the same for weight loss surgery. The studies have shown, everything that's come out post 2020, really, I think, all the studies, it's in fact, some studies I found will say something in the introduction that says it is widely accepted that bariatric surgery is not a long-term solution. Like, they'll admit it because they're trying to sell you a second surgery. That's why. And so I think it needs to be known that this is a temporary measure, if that. They do not mention this in counselling. No, they do not. We used to remove portions of people's brains when they had a mental illness like schizophrenia. That's because of the stigma around mental illness, and there were all sorts of words used to describe people with mental illness. I won't use any of them in public, but they were used until very recently. And we had sanatoriums, and we had, people were institutionalized, and we were electrocuting them. And hey, look, ECT has a time and a place in treatment. I'm not saying it doesn't, but in those days we were a bit barbaric about it. And we were performing lobotomies. We were simply removing parts of people's brains. We don't do that anymore because that's fucking barbaric. Like, it's disgusting. This was happening in the 1940s and 50s, and it was not that long ago, less than 100 years. I know this because my grandmother had a lobotomy for schizophrenia. And I only knew her post-lobotomy, and she did not have a great life. She really didn't. So we now know that it's barbaric, and we wouldn't do it now. But we did it then. It was widely accepted, normal practice. I promise you, there will come a point in time, not too long from now, maybe we'll live to see it, maybe our children will, maybe our grandchildren, I don't know how long it will be, when we will look back at bariatric surgery. My best friend Keisha calls it barbaric surgery. It was a typo, but that's it. I am going to call it barbaric surgery from now onwards. Bariatric / barbaric surgery. We'll look back and go, oh gosh, I can't believe we did that. I don't believe that we, as a medical profession, thought that was okay. Removing a part of your body, your anatomy, for no good reason, for 7 years of weight loss, it does not improve your long-term health outcomes. It just doesn't. There is evidence now that it worsens insulin resistance, that it might give you diabetes. It causes gallstones. It causes ulcers. I can't name all of the side effects because there are too many. If you're interested, I did a masterclass on weight loss surgery. It's included on a lot of packages on my website. So if you're interested in learning about weight loss surgery, please check out that masterclass, and I'll try and do I'll try and find some other bits and bobs that I've put out there for free as well. I just want people to understand. I don't want you to listen to the counselling that you're getting from weight loss surgeons because they're lying to you. They're flat out lying to you. People die of weight loss surgery, and there are suicide rate goes up, alcoholism rate goes up. It's just so bad for you, and it does nothing but make you thin for a temporary amount of time. It's not even forever, it's for 7 years. Blah. All right, it's enough. I gotta go. Hope you enjoyed this. There was a lot of you today. I really enjoyed this. I loved all the comments and questions. Let's do it again. Oh, there's a question here. My senior mum's doctor won't allow her hip surgery until she loses 40 pounds. He also recommended bariatric surgery. She's already extreme about dieting, fasting, etc., etc. So cruel. Can we talk about this in the next AMA? Because I actually have the studies that prove that that actually not only is there no reason to get them to lose 40 pounds, but if whether you lose it or don't lose it has zero impact on outcomes. There's a study that looked at this, literally looked at the hip and knee data, and they found that it didn't matter whether you lost weight prior to surgery or not, you have exactly the same outcomes. Exactly the same. And they list all of the different things like, complications, etc., etc. Weight loss doesn't have any impact. This study, I think, should be used every time somebody is denied surgery. They should just be like, here's the study, read it, read the conclusion, then come back to me and tell me why you're doing this to me. I'd love to talk about that more. I can't talk about it today, but I will do it at the next AMA. The whole do bariatric surgery, but not the thing that actually you need doing. It's a real problem. Yes, I will share those studies. Absolutely. Do you know what I might do? I might do a YouTube video about this. This is where, because I can share studies on YouTube. I will do a YouTube video about this, folks. You wanna find me on YouTube if you haven't already. I'm there. I'm at Fat Doctor UK. I'll link it in my stories. come find me on YouTube. I'll do more of these videos, and I'll specifically do one about hip and knee arthroplasty and why we shouldn't be losing weight. I'm going to do it. I might do it today or tomorrow. Depends. All right. Lovely to see you all. There's me signing off. See you next Wednesday. I think I'm going to stick to 1 p.m. because I think it's working out better in terms of my feeding schedule. This takes work. Thanks. I need to add. So I'm going to add now. All right. Take care. And I'll see you next week. Bye bye.